Hello. Welcome. We're here. It's day 2. How's everyone doing? We got some people in the theater bright and early. Appreciate your dedication to being here right at the start. I hope everyone had a great day yesterday and is excited to do it all again. Today is a little bit more procedural theme versus some more trad roguelike stuff, so we got even more of that too. We got it all. And yeah, we got our morning coffees. I know I've got mine. You got the virtual coffee bar, and hopefully you've got access to a physical coffee bar of some kind or your caffeine of choice. And yeah, gonna have another great day of talks and social space and on conferencing and just hanging out with each other and having a great time. So a lot of the same reminders and administrative stuff as yesterday. We have a hashtag roguelike celebration. Easy to remember. It's the name of our conference. Don't have to shorten it. Twitter has more character limits than when we started. It's great. And check that out for all kinds of live tweets of the events and the stuff going on. I know that sometimes people tweet about cool stuff they're doing in the space. It sounds like Kate Compton's going to be doing some tarot today, which is very exciting. And I want to say thank you to Maggie from White Coat Captioning. The captioning you're seeing below me is live. It's done by a real person named Maggie, who's awesome. So thank you, Maggie, for continuing to be a rock star with the live captions. They're wonderful and I know make a big difference to people's ability to enjoy the conference. So thank you. Also, want to thank Kristen, who did our lovely little overlays of, be back soon and stuff like that. They did a great job. And yeah, so when we have talks, I'll go over some stuff again from yesterday. You'll be able to ask speakers questions during the day with the write a question board that you can see here in the theater. And go ahead and ask those while they're speaking. You don't have to wait until the end. If anything, it's nice if you ask them earlier because you can also upvote questions you find interesting. And then the MC, which is sometimes me, sometimes other people, will be using those to ask the speaker things if there's time at the end of their talk. So make sure to use that. And then the speaker breakout rooms were a new thing that we tried this year. They're working pretty well, though the timing of them seems to confuse folks a little bit. It's kind of either way you do it is a little bit confusing, but to explain it, what we wanted was to not make people choose between continuing to listen to new talks or getting to talk about a talk that they just heard. So the breakout rooms officially start speaker breakout as soon as the current kind of set of talks wraps up. So basically, if someone is still on the stream giving a talk, it is not yet time officially to do speaker breakout because we don't want to make you choose. It will be the next block of social time where we bring up the hey, we'll be back in X minutes kind of thing. Now, you can go where you want. You can hit the bricks at any time and you can go just hang out early. But officially, we say that, well, the next time there's a social block. So that's how those work. Hopefully people are finding them useful. We also, in those rooms and potentially also the unconferencing rooms, will be turning off the embedded video chat just because we want to make it a little bit clearer. It has more trouble if there's a bunch of people in the room, which is why we have Zoom links set up in the unconference rooms. So, you can figure out what works for you, but just in case you notice that and wonder what was up, we have some quirks with video chat we're aware of. This is a totally custom built social space just for roguelike celebration, which is kind of beautiful because yes, it's got, a little bit more jankiness than some other spaces, but we made it just for us and for you. And I think that makes it pretty special. It's largely by Em Laserwalker, who she's done an amazing job with it. So one little quirk we found out yesterday, if you have too many people in chat and they don't fit on your screen, something you can try is zoom out in the Chrome tab, fit more people on, and then you can maybe hear and see them. The joys of rolling your own video chat. So you could give that a look. Chat area scroll is a little finicky, but the best thing you can do, I find, is just manually scroll down to the bottom. And if you leave it there, it should kind of attach itself, but best luck. This is a volunteer-run event. We're all just volunteer organizers, and we'll mention it again at the end, but we're always looking for more people to help us. I was previously just a speaker and got involved last year for the first time with organizing. It's been really great to kind of give back to the community. So we don't know if 2021 will, oh no, this is 2021. We don't know if 2022 fake future number will be digital again or in person. The world is just a shrug. But either way, we tend to need lots of different skills. We need people who help us find great speakers. We need people who can just help with logistics. We need web dev, project management, all the stuff. So reach out to us through email or over Twitter, or basically however you can get a hold of us if you're interested. We're happy to kind of onboard and let people help with what they're able to help with. Other things, if you are watching this on YouTube or Twitch or anything like that, and you wonder what we're talking about with the social space, it's not too late to get into it. Go to our website, roguelike.club, and you can get an Eventbrite ticket, and you can still get into the social space, which is a very cool custom-made place. So that is cool. That is also the only place we have enabled chat because we care about moderation. Reminder that we have a code of conduct. You can get to it from our website or on the space, clicking to the left. And we have moderators active in the space. You can type /mod and your message to send us information about any kind of issue you run into. And please be mindful of the code of conduct. We don't like to ban anyone, but we can and we will. So I think that's all the big stuff. I hope that you'll take chances to explore the space when you get a chance. I will give a tidbit that we have a bit of a special extra secret this year, mostly set up by our amazing organizer, Sam, who is some kind of narrative wizard. And it kicks off from the Space Hangar. So if you haven't explored the Space Hangar yesterday, I would highly encourage you to check it out today while you've got the chance. And that's the best hint I'll give you. You'll have to figure out the rest. And yeah, I think that's all of our big notes for the day. We're going to be kicking off soon with some more lightning talks. Yeah, how is everyone doing? If anyone has questions or just discussion in chat while we take up some time, you can do that. It's great. I'm glad to see everyone reacting so well. And I know I really love the social space. I think that it's pretty special. So I'm glad people agree. And yeah, you could organize a group of people to go all to the hangar together and figure out what this mysterious thing is. What's been my game of the year? That's a really hard question. I guess Disco Elysium came out last year. Darn. It's my easy first answer. There's a lot of stuff to do. Today I've been playing a lot of Monster Train. We're going to get some of that later. I've been playing a lot of Mountain Blade 2 Warband, which is neither here nor there. Is it a roguelike? Maybe. Probably not. But I like it. We're good. They give me 15 minutes here, which is a good thing in case we need it. But we don't actually have people talking for another 6 minutes, which is all right. Yeah, Mountain Blade is a roguelike if you play on hardcore mode. And Monster Train is great. You should play Monster Train. I look forward to that. What talks are people excited about today? I know personally I'm very excited for the Monster Train talk because I love that game. Also, Hades, obviously. Last year we were really feeling the fact that we didn't have Hades, and we were like, next year we'll work it out. Oh, and by the way, something I haven't mentioned, the shirt behind me, you could get this shirt. It's a beautiful shirt. It's designed by Marlo, who did the Dicey Dungeons art, as I think you can probably recognize. And super soft, super comfortable. You can check that out. We got mouse pads. I know we don't have socks, so that's disappointing. We would love if we one day found a way to send socks all over the world. My suggestion was that if you sew together the ends of the mouse pad, it acts like a sock. But whether or not that's comfortable is something that I have not yet tested. Yeah, if people don't know, the social space is open source. You can go check that out yourself. And one other great thing that Phil just reminded me about, we've got a Steam sale. I hope people have had a chance to check that out. You can get a link to it from inside the social space if you go to the Office of Steam, or you can just go to the Steam page and look through the specials and you will find it, which is very exciting. And we have all kinds of games from people who are speaking this year, from people who have spoken in previous years, and people who haven't spoken yet, but are friends of the show and people that we have maybe been trying to get speak for a while. So make sure to give that a try. I know that last night I went and basically filled my cart with every game in there that I didn't already own. So I've got a beautiful set of roguelikes to play as soon as the event is over, which will be a nice way to get past the sadness of the conference being done. I want a roguelike sock knitting pattern, Kate. That's exactly what I want. I've been wanting that every year. And yeah, I guess one reminder about hearing people talking, if you ever feel like the chat is like weirdly quiet, try refreshing your browser because sometimes it ends up not catching it. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And yeah, I don't know. I'm really excited for Xalvier's talk. It's one of my favorites. Yeah, go get Noida. If people don't know, also the talks will be up on our YouTube channel. You can already see the full YouTube streams of what we've done over the last day and today as well. But we will also, as soon as the conference is over, break up those talks into individual YouTube videos so you can enjoy them and share them. I know that I want to go back over Jason Grimblott's talk basically just repeatedly, especially because it was so dense with words like ontological that I need to just go through it over and over. Same with like Michael Brogue's talk. People enjoyed that. There was a large amount of wisdom in that talk that I can't wait to go back over. So I love the fact that we actually get reference videos out of this. I know I send people roguelike celebration videos basically all year. All a delight. I mean, roguelikes are kind of big words, and then it's just a bunch of characters strung together. What is a roguelike except a really big word? Think about it. And if you notice people in chat have funky colors and emojis, explore the space. You too can get funky colors and emojis. I will say, since we're pretty close, if you would like Michael, our first speaker, spoiler alert, to go a couple minutes early, then could do that. Yeah, thumbs up. Thumbs up if you want to do that. I can see you. Yes. Okay. Awesome. There we go. Hi.
Hi there. How's it going?
Hi. It's great. It's wonderful. Thank you for starting early. I've only got so much patter in me to get through the whole day. So without further ado, I will kick off our lightning talks. And we are starting with Michael Langford, an iOS developer making accessible medical and other software for adults, youths, and children's. Listen, I haven't drank all my coffee yet. And you're going to be talking about For the Squishies, which is a delightful title. So I will just let you get going with it.
Thank you very much. I have to say, Children's actually works. One of the clients I have works for Children's Medical Hospitals. So yeah, that works. Anyhow, hi, everyone. I'm Michael Langford. I've been enjoying the Roguelike Celebration a ton. It's been some great stuff. And I wanted to talk to you all, though, as if you had a roguelike game, because I know a lot of you are going to go and eventually finish one, even if you're just currently a player, and some of you actually make some really cool roguelikes already. Okay, this presentation is for the Squishies. It's about making games work for young children. Now, some of this is console specific, but some of it you could remap to keyboard and stuff like that for PC, because that's where a lot of your stuff is, no problem. And this focuses on stuff that's cost effective because, we only have a limited amount of time in the world, and I want everyone to be able to do the changes they need easily. Okay, let's get going. Okay, this presentation shows you how to meet the appetites of children and their parents, both. It's about making only small changes to parts of your game that usually you don't even care that much about, or you have cared, but you really didn't concentrate that as the core part of your game. This greatly raises your sales figures lots of the time, especially when you go to platforms other than PC. Children have a lot more of everything but PCs because we'll go into that later in the talk. But and anyhow, childhood is a massive forced spending for every parent. Parents buy enrichment and fun opportunities for the children themselves, and you want to be part of that spending. Roguelikes also happen to hit this cool sweet spot because there's a lot of content content available at a particular skill level, which isn't the same for traditional one and done big budget games. A kid can play a roguelike many times at a level that's appropriate to them, far more so than something like a Metroid or a Mario Brothers game. Okay, however, every piece of software, not just games, come with an introductory difficulty level that's really hard for some people. You imposed it accidentally. Yeah, it's on the newest players. It's on players who have slightly different time available to them. They may have different attention spans, or they can only read certain things, or their hands are different sizes. Since they're only slightly different, though, you can often serve them with just a little nudge and a little change. Now, here's how you get there. You really don't have to do every step on the path. Doing any of them will get you closer and get you more sales and serve people better. This is going to show you test scenarios. It's going to say, go do this role-playing exercise. And I heard yesterday, a lot of you know how to do that. And really try to think as the people in the tests are instructed to think and act as they are. These tests sometimes will require people with small hands or less proficiency at your game than you, but they don't actually require kids. Every time you hear me mention a kid, the kid is either not present or could be substituted with a smaller proportioned handed adult or something like that. Each test also has those improvements after them, and there's going to be a ladder of games after some of them. Every game in this presentation, I recommend adults go play. Some of them aren't suitable for children, and you'll understand why. But I'm just saying they're all good games, but that doesn't mean they're accessible in these particular ways. And please don't take that as, I hate that thing you like, please hate you. Okay? And first off, kids' hands are small. On the left-hand side there, that's my daughter's hands near the beginning of the pandemic. And on the right there, that's my hands. And you're like, oh, that little orange one on the right, that one would work. They could just buy that one. That's actually an iOS controller. It's not available on the Switch. All of these are the Switch controllers I bought. I actually have like 20, but these are just some good exemplars. So the test is, can a person with small hands do the motion your game requires without injury or discomfort? And again, you can do this with keyboards and mouse with the small hands. And so what you do is you buy a big controller and you give it to a person with small hands. You should try it with other controllers too if you have time. For this and all of these test procedures, they're all written out in the slides, far more than I'm going to go into. And the slides are going to be downloadable afterwards, so you can actually do these on your game. Now, just record the kids' arm, hands, and the game while it's going. Now, you watch. You'll see the kids climb up your controller sometimes to play some games, including yours. You'll see sometimes they're flicking a bunch, trying to deal with the dead zone and things like that. In particular, if they have reach problems, go to the in-game controller remapping if you have that. And if you don't, go use the system remapping right in the middle of the test session and move those flipper buttons down onto the top of the controller so they can finish playing that part of the game and they can get used to those modes. One huge problem that almost always will trip up kids, look for issues with corded held modes. By corded, I mean C-H-O-R-D, like a piano chord where you take your hands and you play with multiple fingers at the same time. On a controller, it's hard for kids to use, but on a computer, if you, for instance, hit Shift and Command C or Control C on your keyboard, that does some damage to your hands and wrists sometimes, especially if you're bending your wrist. So, like, this is both an injury accessibility thing for adults and for kids. It's they just can't control a controller necessarily. Now, you don't have to rework your control scheme. You can just make it so the people who need it can fix it. You can add a button remapping system, usually fairly cheaply, that will address almost 100% of all parents' issues for most games. You might take efforts to report any to support system ones well, but they're sometimes cumbersome and they don't work for people using multiple controllers and couch co-op. You can also just consider changing some of your game modes to being more like an item is what does this, that you swap to that item entirely. Then instead of something where you hold the button down to do this, some of these higher rated games here, they spend a lot of time where you equip an item and you get special abilities or you get a special mode and you can swap between items with a toggle. In some games, they're pretty hopeless as far as like this hopeless hand accessibility thing. Like the new Metroid Dread thing came out. There's 3 corded modes in that game, and there's not enough buttons to remap those and play the game. So a kid's going to have a problem for a number of years playing a game like that. Okay, Now, the rest of these are a lot shorter and less deeper commentary because that one right there is a little rough. So now let's see how kids survive multiplayer. Kids survive multiplayer by cheesy strategies. Think of it as writing a stupid AI down, like walk in a circle and shoot left. Then a proficient player plays with the child. Then the child plays along and does that stupid AI that you tell them to do. Now, you're going to want to write down more than one of these, but just think of like monster things, or there's a Tom 7 video linked right there about stupid chess AIs. And I'm not calling kids stupid here. I'm saying these AIs are intentionally not very good. And if they just let the kids survive your multiplayer, then the kid's able to play multiplayer with their parent. They don't have to get a high score or anything like that to feel awesome. They just need to be there along with mom or dad going boom, boom, boom through everything. Now, while they're playing, note what power-ups and items and characters enable the strategy. Also, notice where in your game cheese strategies always cause an end to a run. I understand you may want to fight cheese strategy in your single player, but in multiplayer, you often want to flip the incentives there to make it so cheese can get past this, or can make it so it doesn't overly tax shared resources. Lastly, once you've gotten to the point where you finished recording the cheese strategy runs, figure out if you have characters that are the good ones for cheese and that they're not of a gender that some kid may want to play. You don't necessarily have to make a boy and a girl as long as you make it a robot that's not clearly a boy. But the youngest kids will want to play. And at that age, there's like zero gender difference as far as who plays video games. So like they will want to play the one more like their gender if you don't go ahead and fix that. Okay, next thing up. Kids eat a lot of snacks. They wiggle incessantly. They get up all the time. They hit every bad thing you put in a menu, and they bump every part of the controller. This test is essentially taking the game controller, sticking it in a blanket and shaking it around. And I don't mean to do this in the action part of your game. That's supposed to kill you. I mean do this in the menu, the pause menu, the load menu in particular. Okay, the real question is, did you delete a player profile that took 80 hours to make? Clearly, you need some more confirmation if you did that, because, you know, adults will do that too accidentally. Does a person end a run when they're on like a pause menu and you do this throw around? Did you accidentally use all the ultra rare super bombs or whatever? A quick fix to this is quickly adding a more complicated confirm screen, like a typing gate rather than pushing a single button, or maybe a math gate if that's even easier to do. Okay, we're moving right along here through our levels. Next up, 2 quick vision tests. Okay, there's 2 scenarios here. One, it's making it so kids' eyes, which are hooked up to kids' pre-literate brains, can play your game. The fix is to turn on one of your other localizations. You're like, wait a second, Michael, I don't have my game localized yet. Okay, then go to your font and hack all the characters to be similar sized characters, but different, and then play the game that way. And congratulations, you just made a new language. And now if a person who isn't you can get through your game, then a kid probably can get through your game. The general fix by this, by the way, is to add more glyphs, like these little hearts in the picture, or like, like a bullseye for archery or something like that. Now, for parents, you're also going to be adding more glyphs a lot. And also you're going to be cutting down the text you have on the screen and make the text you have on the screen bigger. Sit 1.5 times as far as normal from your screen or your television and go ahead and play the game. We're almost done. Attention. This is an easy test. You get a slow system or a slow PC. And by slow PC, I mean spinning hard disk. Put your game on it, run your game. Watch the kid play, or the young adult, or anyone else. Now, anytime they die right after a load screen, that's what you got to fix. And don't go fix your load screen performance. That takes a lot of work. Instead, add a confirmation screen that partially obscures the action, and boom, you have solved the problem for all of those people, and you don't even have to show it on fast loading systems. Or you can just go add some transit hubs or something like that, like Metroid does. Any of that would make this stop. By the way, this game is great, but these screens kill my kid in this. Next up is shame, and it's not really about shame. Now, writing these things are really kind of hard because they have to work for a lot of different games, a lot of different testers. So I'm going to go through this, and you can ask questions about it later if you want to know why it's set up like this. Okay, you stage a Zoom call with a friend from your phone. Ding, 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 ding. You call them and you're like doing some work. Your game is on. Okay, they go, wait a sec. I got to, oh, that's my husband's boss. And they leave the room and Zoom call still on. For some reason, you set your phone behind you. And then all of a sudden you hear that the boss's kid, that's her husband's boss's kid, got left in the room with the Zoom meeting while your friend's not there. So this is just a person that you don't have any relationship with and you could easily embarrass. Now, you're going to play your game. Anytime you feel anxiety, you may embarrass your friend, take a screenshot. Anytime you may want to turn the sound on your game because there's something gross sounding or something like that, or something that will attract the kid's attention that is right next to gross stuff, take a screenshot. When you want to make sure the kid can't read the text because it says something that, a kid is going to be embarrassing with. Or anytime you want to offer explanation or mischaracterize what's happening to deceive a child, take a screenshot. If that stuff's on a optional part of your game or it's behind modes where they can turn off a lot of that, they don't have to turn off all of it, a lot of that, then the game is playable around children. However, if you can't even play your game on the same system, a kid may occasionally turn on, like many games that have really graphic cover art or store art, which is great for adults and sales, but isn't so good for parents because the kid will come up and see someone's ripping their eye off. You may have some adjustments to make it so you can sell more to parents and to children. Anyhow, don't be ashamed of your games. Art should always express the full range of human emotions. This is just about making commercial art, all right? So you can sell more and make games workable for parents. If you have any comments or want variations on this, or if you happen to need any references on the games or any of these controller references for arguments in your company, feel free to use them and have a good day. Thanks.
Wow, thank you, Michael. Everyone's been really enjoying it, and especially I think it seemed like basically every point to do with children, at least someone in chat was like, oh, that would also be so helpful for me. I mean, like I have ADHD brain and the attention point is like so valid. A game loses me if I have to just sit and stare at nothing for a ridiculously small number of seconds. So
yeah, I feel that too. Mormo definitely has gotten me a couple times, or Swords of Ditto has gotten me a couple times with those load screens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have time for at least one question, which is an interesting roguelike specific one from Note, which is, would you consider removing or lightening up the effects of permadeath, like for accessibility for children, or would that ruin the pull for roguelikes? Do you have thoughts on is that something that is discouraging to kids or?
So one game you will actually see rated higher in my talk, higher than every AAA game, is Son of a Witch. And the default answer here is, other than it's just go do what they did. There's a paper in the references section I have where he writes about how he dealt with permadeath, and he actually even made it lighter. And they added extra modes to make it where permadeath is removed. And so permadeath is useful for keeping the game at the level of the kid, which I told you was a big value. But you may also want to give them the chance to not have permadeath so they can experience the rest of the game if they're of lower proficiency, or even a mode where permadeath still exists, but the game is really easy, so they're less likely to encounter it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, yeah, it's like, thank you, Caves of Cud, for adding a mode that doesn't involve proper permadeath, because games are hard, even for adults. And that looks like that actually answers to another question from Travis, which was if you could name a couple games that do child friendliness really well. So I guess part of the answer is look at those things in your talk and look at the ones that are rated really highly.
Okay, Son of the Witch, I would definitely go for that. Rayman Legends, if they can do platformers at all, they will enjoy. Stardew Valley, you can eventually get them to, but the economic focus loses some children. Sort of Ditto is actually very playable, other than those the load screen issues. Cat Quest 2 usually is pretty fine. There's a couple challenging ones. And the other one I was going to point out. Oh, I don't have it anymore. I mean, you can get through basic levels of a lot of games. And as long as you as a person are okay with that, that will work well. But anyhow, if you ping me on Twitter, I have a list of like a billion games. I mean, literally I buy them and go like, nope, this isn't going to work. Nope, hey, finally we found one that works.
Nice.
So
yeah. Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Michael. That was a fantastic talk. And awesome. And we'll move on. And then, I think I'll announce the speaker breakouts at the end so that it's a little bit, clear to people when it is. But thank you so much. And hopefully people can see you around.
Thank you.
All right. Moving on to the next lightning talk. We now have Jonas Rabi, who I'm very excited to have. Hello!
Hey,
I'm so
it's such a
excited
pleasure
for
to be
your
here.
talk.
Me too,
I'm just
honestly.
gonna let you get into it. Pokemon Glitch, game developer,
Sure.
9 years. Cool person. Let's hear about Pokemon.
All right, let's go. Thank you for coming to my talk, Pokemon Glitch, story of a like Huffer. I'm Ines Ravi, and let's just go with it. Let's go. So you may have heard of the oversimplification that DNA is like source code for living beings. Well, scratch that. Today we're going to do source code is like the DNA of games. What's cool, if you think about it this way, is that you can take a game, take its source code, mutate it, change the bits in it randomly, and then get a new game at the end and have a new mutated game and explore it. The game I choose to do that with is Pokemon Gold. Why? 3 reasons. One, it's easy to mutate. Once you have a run file, it's easy to just change some bits in it. Two, there's a very good chance that it works actually. Because of the way Pokemon games were made, if you change some bits, there's a good chance that it's still a valid game to play. And also, I'm a huge nerd. I know this game by heart. If something has changed, I'll be able to see it. I'll be able to guide you through it. So I took Pokemon Gold. Let's do a quick recap of what's Pokemon Gold for those of us who don't know what it is. So Pokemon Gold is like a Game Boy Color game where you wander a world inhabited by strange creatures named Pokemons, which have like elemental aspects to them. You're supposed to capture them, to befriend them, to train them, and to battle with them. The goal is to defeat all of the gym leaders in each major city to then beat the Elite Four, which is like the best of the trainers, to become like the best Pokemon trainer in the whole world. Along the way, you will be able to help communities, to save the world from a criminal organization, and to explore relationships between nature, folklore, and the humans who are slowly colonizing this space. Yes, there's all this theme is Pokemon. So we're going to do that. We're going to fuck it up by imitating Pokemon Gold. Thing is, I did that and it just didn't work. Why? Because it's hard. It took me a lot of time, a lot of tries to actually get something that worked at the end. At first, I had something that just didn't boot at all. Like the Game Boy emulator I used just crashed. So I had to tweak the parameters, tweak the locations in the source code that I wanted to get. And slowly, I got a game that could pass the title screen, then enter your name, then crash, and then I got like a game where you can enter your name, leave the first room, and it took me about 200 tries to get there. The game I got at the end is something I call Pokemon Glitch, and I'd like to explore it with you today. So, immediately, if you know the Pokemon Gold, like the original game, you know that something is not right there. On the title screen, it's supposed to be the shadow of a legendary Pokemon. But there, you can see that this shadow has radioactive green fevers. You know that something has changed there. And your suspicion is only going to be confirmed by what's right after. You are greeted by the glitch sprite of a Professor Pokemon who says, "Hey, welcome to this cool world of Pokemon. We're going to an adventure together." And you finally get to your room and you can see that bits of the title screen is still attached to the furnitures and the colors are messed up in the whole thing. This glitch aesthetic will be there for the whole game. It's not just superficial. It's very embedded in the game because sometimes it can react to actions. You can see, for instance, on the bottom left, that when you interact with the items, the world just reacts organically by changing its color, changing the way it is displayed. It gives like a whole new vibe to forests, which are now extra creepy, and it gives a new parallel worlds thing where if you turn in a road at the wrong corner, you will find yourself into a dimension field with infinite staircases, or you can like just easily come up a clone of yourself and be able to chat with him. That's Pokemon Glitch for you. This glitch aesthetic is there. It's not only pretty, it's also dangerous. For instance, in the beginning of the game, you can speak with your rival who's just spying on your neighbor, and when you speak to him, he's supposed to push you away, and that's it. But in this game, if you speak to him, the game will just crash. And if you haven't saved, you have lost all your progress. People can kill you in Pokemon Glitch. That's not usual. And if you relied, like me, on healing your Pokemon often, well, you will be happy to know that in this game, there's like a running gag that makes every Pokemon Center almost unusable. Sometimes it's very straightforward, like, hey, there's no door, it's just a radio tower. And sometimes it's very insidious, like you will enter the Pokemon Center, you will heal your Pokemon, but you won't be able to come out. And if you have saved right after, you are fucked. You have to restart the whole game again. There's permadeath now in Pokemon Glitch. Sometimes there's even added obstacles because the tiles can be randomly moved. Sometimes there's like walls appearing, sometimes like shortcuts appearing too. This it also means that sometimes it can make whole areas of the game inaccessible. So what I did is that I accepted that I had to use cheat codes only in these specific occasions where a major portion of the game that is important is not accessible. And that's the only time I use cheat codes during my playthroughs, but you kind of have to do it. There's like so many cool stories to tell about Pokemon Glitch, and like to tell you just one, and how to explain you how the weirdness of it can actually make sense sometimes. So, for instance, there's like this dungeon in Pokemon Glitch, in Pokemon Gold, sorry, that's named the Bellsprout Tower. When you go enter it and you speak to an old lady who tells you, "Hey, the legend says that the tower used to be a 100 feet tall Bellsprout, which is a plant type Pokemon that is on the right there." And in the original game, like, yeah, okay, thank you, that's a fun story. I'm just gonna wreck this dungeon. And because it's early game, it's easy to beat. But in Pokemon Glitch, when you go upstairs, you will find yourself against a monk who has Bellsprouts. And instead of having level 3 Bellsprout, he has one Bellsprout with a level 131. And at this point, your neurons might connect. This tower is supposed to be a big-ass Pokemon. And I'm battling a Pokemon that has a level that is not even legal in this game. Am I actually fighting the tower right now? In the early game, I can't do that. This is just impossible. This Pokemon will just wreck you. And sometimes you will be facing situations like that in Pokemon Glitch, with Pokemon that are clearly overpowered, not only for your level skill, but for the whole game itself. So you have to use your knowledge of the game and your creativity to get yourself out of these situations. Here's one solution I found. So, in this tower, if you wander it at night, you might encounter a ghost Pokemon. You catch it. You train it to level 16, and it learns an attack that's named Curse. That, funnily enough, is Glitch has cubs with a B in the game. And what's cool about this attack is that it doesn't deal absolute damage, which is useless against an opponent which has so many HPs. But it deals relative damage, meaning that every turn, the Bellsprout will lose 1/8 of its HP. So you just have to last a turn, which is already very hard, honestly. Like, you have to be lucky to be able to make it sleep at the right time, and at the same time survive using other Pokemons that you will sacrifice to build Bellsprout. And that's the only solution I found, honestly. It is very, very hard, but you can get on with it. It's not impossible. You have to be lucky and creative. And this whole idea of rediscovering a game you already knew will always be there in this game, which is what makes it exciting and interesting to explore. An example: if you take the original evolution line of your starter Pokemon, in this case I choose Cyndaquil, which is a cute, shy fire hedgehog, which evolves when you train it into a bigger hedgehog and then into a big hedgehog. That's it. It's just straightforward, simple, fire, power, let's go. In this game, at level 36, my fire hedgehog evolved into a cute little plant Pokemon. And at the end, evolved into a big-ass plant Pokemon. This kind of evolution has never been seen in a Pokemon game before. First, there's like 5 steps. I've never seen that. And it switches from a fire type to a plant type. So at the end, you have a plant type Pokemon who knows fire moves. It's incredibly useful sometimes. And you can even try to make up a story about it. Like, hey, it doesn't make sense to have a plant that grows from fire, but actually there's like this plant that's named Sequoia that can grow from the ashes of a forest fire. And I don't know, it can make like cool little headcanon stories for you. The game is full of stuff like that. It's a broken, mysterious world that is also hostile towards you, where the storylines are broken and reconnected in strange ways. It's a world that you can't save. Team Rocket rules this world. You can't heal Pokemons that are important in this game. It will wreck you. It doesn't have any chill. It doesn't have any respect towards you, the player. This game will break you. It will make you save right before a glitch, so you have to restart the whole thing again and again. It wants to push you away, but you will continue going in it to explore it to the end and get the end of it. The only way to beat the legends that are not supposed to be in there is to curse them along the way, and that's very interesting. And this leads to another story that I want to tell you that I will consider a spoiler for Pokemon Glitch. So if you don't want to know the end of Pokemon Glitch, please come back for next talk. If you want to know about it, please stay, because I think this is what makes this talk very interesting. Let's go. So, the final boss of Pokemon Gold is Red. Red, the protagonist from the first original Pokemon Red. His appearance in the game is very mysterious. Like, when you meet him, he says absolutely nothing. He's not even supposed to be there. You don't know he's there. But when you meet him, he says absolutely nothing. He rolls over your Pokemon team, and that's it. So you come again, you muster the strength to beat him, and when you do that, he says nothing, absolutely nothing, just ... and then he disappears. And the community is like crazy about this stuff. Like, why is Red there? Why is he saying nothing when he beats us and when he disappears right after? But nobody knows. And I wanted to know if in Pokemon Glitch, if there's more to it. And I'm very glad to tell you that yes, there's more to it. When you meet Red, first, his name doesn't appear as Trainer Red as usual. His name is Rocket Red. Rockets, like the evil bad guys in this game. Also, he will wreck you. Like, it's Red. He has overpowered Pokemon too. He will wreck you. But at this point, you might remember, we have a Pokemon that can curse him. And this is what I did. I freaking cursed Red to the end so I could finally beat him. And I expected him to just say nothing and disappears or have a fun thing. And this is what happened. When you beat him, Red does not say nothing. He actually says something. He speaks in gibberish, a mix between random glitch letters and English. And he asks you a question. He wants you to choose one of your Pokemon. And like, what? What do you want? I can't understand what you're saying. So I choose the signature Pokemon of his friend, which is a Ghost-type Pokemon, which knows Curse, right? And then he asks me to choose one attack of the Pokemon. So I choose Cups, like the cursed attack. And he takes the Pokemon, he takes the attack, and he says the curse is erased. And then he disappears. So at this point, you're like, what did I just play? I played a game that puts me into a broken world that is very hostile and push me away every time with strange glitches, and I push it to the end. So finally I meet like a protagonist from first game who just erases the curse and disappears. Wow, you just played a roguelike from Halfer. A roguelike because there's like so much uncertainty in the game, and you have so much rediscovery when you play it, even if you know the original game. Also a roguelike because it has a lot of permadeath in likely places. But also, I would say it has no offer. Some of the mechanics we've seen, nobody consciously designed them. They just appeared, not Nintendo, not me, not my program. It just appeared from the randomness and the mixing of it all. Something for a story. Nobody wrote it. It's a mix, not Nintendo, not me, not my program. It's a mix of everything we've seen, everything we've processed together, everything we pieced up. There just was the right ingredients there to paint a cool story into the players and you, the audience, mind. That's it. Thank you for coming to Pokemon Glitch, a story that I want to tell you for years, by myself, Younes Rabi. If you want to know more about it, if you want to see more of this stuff, if you want to play this game, drop me a line at Pyrofox on Twitter. Thank you.
Giannis. I can't handle this. Wow. That was something else. What a mic drop at the end. No time particularly for questions, which also I don't know what people would have coherent questions beyond just wow.
I'm just sad I couldn't see the chat because I really wanted to see your reactions. I hope there's a copy somewhere that I could see.
You know what? There isn't a normal one, but I'll try and grab you some of the reactions.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yes, people were definitely losing it, and also just repeating cubs.
Yes, this is what I want to see.
Thank you so much. Wonderful to have you. Thank you for sharing this with us. What an amazing thing. So
thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and then following up on that amazing story, We got one more lightning talk from Sraka Lillian, who will be talking about procedural phonology, generating name generators, another level of procedurality. So, yes. All
Awesome.
right.
Can you
Take
hear
it
me
away.
okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
Awesome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. It's a tremendous honor to get to talk about one of my all-time favorite subjects with one of my all-time favorite communities. My name is Shrika Lillian, and I'm going to talk about random name generators and how we can use phonology to generate not only names, but name generators themselves. My goals as your guide today are to introduce fundamental concepts clearly and concisely, to open a window into a world you might not have known existed, and to highlight what's cool about a thing I love. As a disclaimer, I'm not an expert on phonology. I should do my slides. I'm not an expert. I've never formally studied linguistics. I'm just a nerd who wanted to make a random naming language generator, which I've been working on and off for the past couple of years. And everything I know about phonology, I've learned through that experience. So my perspective on the subject might be a little informal. And so bear in mind, this is just one count among many. Sometimes in works of fantasy fiction, you have worlds with multiple nations or cultures, and sometimes they speak different languages. When we give different characters or places names that are identifiable as belonging to the same language, ties them to a parent culture, with, much as in real life, and suggests a distinction between that culture and other cultures speaking different languages. So this can be a cool, interesting, or meaningful avenue of identity within the world, or it can just be a cool detail. If you're doing proc gen work and you're generating arbitrarily many worlds with arbitrarily many cultures, and you want the names used in those cultures to reflect distinct cultural identities, you need a way to supply arbitrarily many languages to draw names from. And generating random name generators is a great way to supply yourself with a never-ending supply of naming languages. So with this purpose in mind, we can name a couple of goals for our generators and the languages they represent. First, their output should be varied. A name generator that only generates one name won't do the job, no matter how pretty the one name is, nor will a generator that produces 1,000 names that are technically distinct but experientially very similar. It's okay to have a couple similar names. English speakers survive having John, Jen, Jean, Jane, June, Jan, all in their rotation. But if these were all the names we had, it would get confusing. So on average, names want to be mostly distinct from most other names. At the same time, the names name generator produces should be cohesive. Names within a language have the sense of sharing something in common, which isn't necessarily evident in every pair of names, but across larger number of names, patterns are visible of sounds and shapes that recur. So in this list of Latin masculine given names, you can immediately see a handful of common sounds keep coming up, as well as a suffix that is what happens to be universal in this set of names. At the same time, the overall output of a name generator should also be distinctive, which is to say that the patterns of sound and structure that are consistent within the language should be different from the patterns of sound and structure in other languages at hand. So when you compare these Japanese masculine given names to the Latin ones from earlier, you can see there are different sounds in use, different consonant clusters, different suffixes, etc. A language that's both internally cohesive and externally distinctive is likely to have a strong sense of identity, which is essential if you have more than one language in your world. And then on a functional level, we want the names each generator produces to feel intentionally formed. What this means precisely is a matter of interpretation, but we at least want to keep names that read as generation errors to a minimum. And we should also hope that our names are generally pronounceable, whether that pronunciation, the pronunciation people come to is correct or not. If you can't come to any, if you can't find any way to pronounce a name that's in front of you, it'll have a harder time sticking in memory and risks degenerating into noise and being forgotten. Phonology is a branch of linguistics concerned with speech sounds and their relationships to each other, specifically as they occur within a language. Phonology is concerned with questions like, how do we break a language's speech up into different sounds? What sequences of sounds are allowed and which are forbidden? How do different sounds influence each other in proximity? And how do a language's sounds change over time? Phonology is not particularly concerned with the production and perception of speech sounds as physical phenomena. This is the concern of phonetics, which is a distinct field that often is relevant to phonology, not a ton of use to us right now. Phonology helps us make name generators in a couple different ways. First, it helps us identify the different components that come together to make up the sound system of a language. And then second, it highlights the patterns that shape each of those components individually. So once we identify these components, we can describe the basic shape of a procedure for generating a language, which I will do next. And then we'll take a closer look at each of these components and see what phonology can tell us about generating them individually. So our basic strategy is built around three components. To start, naming language has to know what sounds or phonemes are available and how prominent each one is. And this knowledge is called our phonemic inventory. Then it needs rules to combine those phonemes together to form syllables, and that knowledge is called phonotactics. With your phonemic inventory and phonotactics decided, we can then generate one or more syllables at runtime and then combine those to make multisyllabic names. We might also use some additional techniques to smooth out syllable boundaries when combining syllables, and some of those techniques come into play again if we have more complex names with multiple roots in them or suffixes attached, and all of that stuff falls under the category of morphology. Deciding a language's phonemic inventory is the first step in generating a language, but before we can even do that, we have to decide what languages are available to go in sounds, what sounds are available to go in languages at all. This is both a practical question and an aesthetic one. There are more than 2,000 different sounds by some estimates across all of the world's languages, and the Roman alphabet we use in English has only 26 letters for us to work with. So for the sake of keeping our workload manageable and our outputs readable, there's a wisdom in keeping our master inventory small and mostly limiting it to sounds folks in our audience have some prior intuitions about how to pronounce already. For me, this means not using a lot of accent marks, which help distinguish sounds, but also I think risk coming off as visual noise to a lot of English speakers not used to interpreting them. And then to keep things from feeling too English or too European in general, I like to use a handful of un-English sounds with interesting alphabetic representations, which I've highlighted in this slide. These all represent relatively common sounds worldwide, but are still pronounced reasonably close to the letters I use to spell them, so they can add some flavor without causing too much confusion. With a master inventory decided, we can then decide which of these sounds should be available in the specific language we're generating. There's a lot of data online, a couple different databases that can describe the prevalence of each sound across languages as individual sounds, and we can use that to estimate the chance of each sound appearing independently in the generator. There are more sophisticated ways of doing this that might produce more cohesive results, but in practice, the results are a little bit subtle. So in my view, it's perfectly valid just to select phonemes independently and not worry about how they relate to each other. Phonotactics is a big question dealing with where different sounds are allowed to occur structurally and in relationship to each other. The highest level question here is about syllable structure, which has a huge impact on the overall shape of words. The traditional model of the syllable consists of an optional consonant portion called the onset, followed by a mandatory vowel portion called the nucleus, and then another optional consonant portion called the coda. Virtually all languages allow syllables to have onsets, but not all languages allow codas, and languages also differ on other factors, like whether onsets or codas can include multiple consonants, or whether onsets are optional or mandatory, or whether codas only occur in the middle of words, or at the end of words, or both. With syllable structure established, we can ask questions about how frequently each of the sounds in our language occurs and in what contexts. Sometimes consonants appear more often in one place than another. For instance, the H sound in English only appears in the onsets of syllables, and I think literally never in the coda, which you can see in the great number of English words beginning with the breathy sound, compared to the complete absence of any ending with one. We can also ask questions about how specific sounds operate within the structure of a syllable. And particularly important here are consonant clusters, as most languages are highly restricted in which consonants are allowed to touch and in which contexts. So if we aren't careful, we can wind up with consonant soup. At the same time, an unusual consonant cluster can be really distinctive and evocative, so we might not want to be too prescriptive about what is and isn't allowed. Morphology describes how multiple meaningful elements like roots and suffixes are assembled to create more complex words. We call these units of meaning morphemes, and strictly speaking, it isn't necessary to have multiple morphemes in a name, but seeing elements recurring across different names can help us identify internal structure, which helps tell that there is an intentional order to how names are shaped. When two morphemes are combined to make a more complex word, sometimes sounds change the boundary between them. This is a really complicated area that we're free to mostly ignore, but we should be aware that it can potentially put two sounds together that are phototactics as forbidden to touch. In real languages, these meanings can result in some complex changes to one or both sounds, or to even to sounds surrounding them. But I've learned that one of the most common results of these changes is just to delete one of the offending sounds entirely. I used to be really hesitant to doing this, but once I learned how common it was, I wished I'd always known, because you can solve a lot of problems by just deleting them. But no matter how well we answer our phonological questions, we're still going to get some names that don't look quite right. When this happens, we have a couple options. We can try to identify what we don't like about them and change our strategy or add new safeguards to prevent those problems from cropping up in the first place. But we can also try to embrace the weirdness of them. Partly, I think we should be humble when making judgments about what names are sufficiently normal or attractive for our purposes, because the possibility space of language is completely enormous, and our exposure to it is necessarily quite limited, especially for many of us who only speak English. And our exposure to languages outside of English is heavily biased in favor of the handful of European and maybe Asian languages that we have the most incidental contact with. So when we generate a name that looks weird to us, we have the option to ask if that might be something that's normal in another language that we don't have the context for, or that could be normal or could have been normal in a language that existed in the past but no longer does, or that could still exist in a language, or that could exist in a language that doesn't yet exist. Which brings me to my final thought, which is that when we're playing with language, we don't have to feel beholden to simulating the real world in its entirety. This is, at the end of the day, a generative art that has the potential to be creative, speculative, or a fantastical endeavor that celebrates the weird and unreal and potentially real right alongside with the actually real. Fundamentally, generating name generators is an art, at least as much as a science, and art can and should do a lot more than reproduce established rules. And that's all I know. Thanks for coming to my talk, and have a happy Roguelike celebration.
Thank you. What a lovely final slide. Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Yeah, people in chat were definitely engaging and sharing lots of other kind of things it reminded them of. So
I'm thrilled to hear it.
Yeah, it spawned, I think, a lot of conversation. So thank you.
I hope I didn't leave too little or too much time for questions.
I think that we just hit the moment of the end of the block. So you timed it into exactly the lightning talk slot. So thank you for that. And we will now have the speaker breakout. So if people want to talk to you about chronology, if you're going to be around, we've assigned you the Rogue room. So people can find you there.
Cool. Thanks
And
again. See you there.
yeah, enjoy the rest of the conference. All right, and then rolling back a little bit, if you want to talk about Pokemon Glitch with Eunice, that would be in the tourist room. And if you want to talk about squishies with Michael Langford, that will be in Warrior, if the speakers are able to hang around. We don't force them to do anything like that. But again, Michael Langford's talk on squishies in Warrior, Eunice talk on Pokemon Glitch in Tourist, and Sareka's talk on phonology in Rogue. So those are the breakouts. We're going to have 15 minutes of just freeform social time, and then we're going to do unconferencing, which yesterday was at the very end of the day. If you weren't around or if you didn't understand that the last time, I'll give you a little run through again of what I mean when I say unconferencing. Basically, it's like the social time, but a little bit more kind of structured in that we have the unconferencing hall, which you can find on the map or off of the central hall. And it has a note wall where you can propose topics and you can thumbs up other topics. And after 5 minutes past the beginning of the unconference block, so that would be 10:35. Yeah, 10:35 Pacific, 15 minutes past now, and then 5 minutes past there. A moderator will assign the rooms for the top rated topics officially to each of the unconferencing dungeon rooms. And so you can go there to have those conversations. There are Zoom rooms so that you can have video chat with a lot more people than quite works nicely in the space. And yeah, you're free to stay there as long as you like. Again, come and go as you wish. You don't have to stay in just one Zoom room. You don't have to go to the Zoom rooms at all, but that's going to be what's happening there. I think that's where there's going to be some tarot going on, if I recall correctly. And yeah, you're free to just join and lurk. That's also cool, or explore the space. Make sure to remember at some point to check out the Office of Steam and the Steam sale, because that's very exciting. And yeah, have fun. We're going to do that unconference block. You can always check the schedule inside of the social space. And also, once the unconferencing topics have been set, the Happening Now button will tell you what topics are in what room, which is very useful. If your schedule is still the same as yesterday, just refresh the page and it should correct itself. So that's all from me. And we will be back at 11:30 Pacific. Whatever that is in your local time, the schedule is in your local time. We'll be back in like an hour and 15 for Alice Lai from Hades and Brian Cronin from Monster Train. So very exciting. And I will see you all then and probably see some of you around the space. Enjoy. Hello, wonderful roguelike attendees. I'm back. We're back. Hi. Welcome to our next set of talks. I hope everyone enjoyed the unconference and had some fun. I hope that some people got to explore the space. I think it seems like a few more people have been making their way to the Space Hangar Lounge, and doing some exploring of the fun stuff we've got there, which is excellent. Thanks again to Sam, who did a lot of our social space kind of narrative flow this year and has done some really cool stuff. Reminder as we get into the next talks, if you're watching this on Twitch or YouTube or anything like that and wondering where you could be chatting or what this social space is, what a Space Hangar Lounge is, come on down to roguelike.club, get an Eventbrite ticket. It's not too late. You can join the space. And some other reminders, you can check out the swag that is for sale, our mouse pads and shirts. They're going to be on sale until the 23rd. So that'll be your last chance to get them. And check out the Steam sale. That's going to be running until end of day Monday. So don't wait too long on that. And yeah, I hope that everyone's having a good time. If you have any feedback about the social space itself, we have a note board in the central hall. So you can check that out. And then if you have speaker questions as we're going, those speaker questions, put them on the note wall inside the theater. So I think that that's it. So we're going to move on to our next set of talks. We've got some real exciting ones for you folks. We're going to be starting out with Alice Sly, longtime developer, got started playing shmups and roguelikes ever since she was a kid, and has done some artistic and experimental work in the past, and now is currently and happily making games at Supergiant, and is here to talk about multiplicative power in Hades. We're so happy to have you, Alice.
Great, thank you for that lovely intro. I'm really happy to be here, and I just love this roguelike celebration as this conference has gone on for several years now. It's so great seeing this genre just like explode in popularity.
For sure. And I think, we were talking a lot last year about how Hades had a big part of an extra level of explosion. So wonderful to have you, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. So I'm Alice Lai, and this is All Together Now, a talk about building multiplicative power in Hades. First of all, I think just a quick introduction. Who is Alice? I am a technical designer on the Supergiant team. So technical designer is one of those like fabulously like mutable terms. It means a lot of different things in a lot of different studios. But for Supergiant, it means I'm part designer. I primarily help with weapons and boons on Hades, as well as other game design content. It also means that I help implement the content that I come up with and other designers come up with. It also means that I fix the bugs that come out as a result of me implementing that content. I am a lifelong rogueliker. I remember playing Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup at summer camp. And before Supergiant, I made a very small roguelike called Cosmic Crown, which is an experiment in making a roguelike that functioned on a one-dimensional axis, so it could only move up and down. What is Hades? So Hades is a roguelike dungeon crawler where you play as Zagreus, the son of Hades, trying to fight his way to the surface with the help of his godlike relatives. This talk will include a couple gameplay spoilers for Hades, but no content spoilers. I've also heard Hades described as a game where you are a kid stuck at home, prevented by his father from going outside. We are aware of the similarities to a popular webcomic, but we won't comment on the similarities to a popular webcomic. Credit for the fan art goes to GE Nice Cream on Twitter. So I think, so that aside, I think I'd love to talk a little bit about multiplicative power. This is really just a 7-syllable way to say combos. I think is the term that we're most popular with. One example is from Binding of Isaac, just to take another action roguelike. There's the Swallowed Penny, which drops coins when your character is damaged. There's the Bloody Penny, which drops health when you pick up those coins. And there's Money with equals power, which increases your damage based on how much money you've picked up. So I think individually, each of these items are kind of like, they're all right. They're not like game changing. For example, dropping coins when you're damaged, usually the amount of coins you get, like 1 or 2, isn't enough to offset the potential of just losing your run later on. Dropping health when picking up coins is okay, but overhealing goes to waste, and it just you end up with a lot of like health just lying around. And money equals power is kind of nice, But by the end of an average game in Binding of Isaac, for me, I had like maybe 20 to 40 cents, which is like appreciable, but not like game changing. However, if you combine all of these together, you kind of create this great engine if you find a blood donation machine to just get infinite coins and infinite health, letting you max out your money and your damage at the same time. So this is kind of neat. This is an example of combo where each of the individual items, you kind of can intuit that they will go well together. But another example comes from Enter the Gungeon. So all of these are taken from the fandom wikis of the respective games. Much loved and loathed, popular dominator of search engine results. This is in Enter the Gungeon. We have these other combos kind of in these two examples. I have the B plus and the B's combo. Here, the only thing that caused this combo is kind of work on the back end to make them combo. And for the player, the only thing that implies it is that they have the similar theming. They are all B-related items. So a player playing the game will say, okay, so I found that picking up like items gives me these combos. I bet if I pick up B-related items, I will get B combos. I think this is really great. I think like combos are anytime when two or more elements provide a new and unexpected result. And the biggest thing that I love about combos, part of it is like from a designer point of view, it's just more content. I think when you think of a game and you think of a content of a game, a lot of it is like areas and spells and monsters and biomes and stuff like that. But I think combos and just like these kind of emergent gameplay properties is a really big part of it too. Part of it is as you learn combos, you kind of feel more mastery over the game. Maybe when playing Binding of Isaac, you're saying like, you can sort of say like, oh, when I was a newbie at the game, I didn't know about the swallowed penny, bloody penny, money equals power combo. But now that I know about it, I can like go for it or decide deliberately to avoid it. And I also have this I have this in my back pocket for how to play the game. I think it's really cool because it also allows players to influence the power and difficulty curve in ways that let them feel a lot of mastery as well. Kind of like I can go for this combo and it'll get me let me breeze through these two areas, but I'll probably get in trouble later. Or I'll probably have to suffer for these two areas, but I'll pick up the combo enabler in the last area and really zoom ahead of difficulty curve. So in Hades, we kind of have a couple examples of this. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the gun secondary build. The gun, which is a very popular ancient Greek weapon. It has a secondary attack that fires a arcing grenade. We have an ability called Cluster Bomb, which causes you to fire 5 grenades instead of 1, which is really, really fun. Then Rocket Bomb, which is another ability that changes those grenades into rocket launchers. And then we also have god abilities, in this case, Dionysus Flourish, which causes your secondary attacks to inflict a stacking damage over time effect, like poison. I think when you combine all of these abilities together, you kind of get this like rocket launching, rocket shotgun ability that allows you to apply this damage over time effect really quickly, really effectively at levels that you normally wouldn't be able to do. We also have stuff like, and in terms of like the second ability where we're talking about Enter the Gungeon and this kind of extensions, like flavor extensions. In Hades, we have an ability, we have a god called Ares. And Ares has, Ares has an ability that changes your ranged attack into like a spinning blade vortex. Now, by default, this attack deals like a ton of damage, but it's really difficult to land on a target because it moves very slowly, and enemies can just like walk right out of it. We have an ability called Engulfing Vortex, which allows this blade rift to kind of suck enemies in as it travels. And then we have another ability called Vicious Cycle, which increases the damage you deal enemies take the longer they're in a particular vortex. So I think this is really neat because it takes an ability and either removes its downsides or accentuates its upsides. You kind of see like how both of them can be really effective, and both of them can really change the way you interact with an ability. I think another thing that we found in Hades is that it's really important to look at these combos and look at power given to the player and look at the goals of each system. So just now I was talking about the gun and Ares, and those are two different systems pretty deliberately. In Hades, we have weapons, which kind of change your primary and secondary attacks. So we have like the sword, the shield, the bow, and the gun, of course. We have these things called hammers, which upgrade your weapon and change their primary or secondary attack in one way or another. As well as later on in the game, we introduced something called aspects, which further kind of mold the way you approach a weapon by introducing like cross-control synergies. Like now your ranged attack will interact with your attack in a certain way, or your secondary and your primary attack will have some kind of interactions with each other, just built in from the start. We also have gods. Gods are kind of another system, but instead of changing your primary or secondary attack the way weapons do, gods add special effects, kind of more magical, thematically, like magical feeling abilities to your attacks among those like status effects. And in Hades, we also have what we call duo boons, which are represented by two gods working together. So each of these systems, we kind of have our own goals. And I think it's really helpful from both a designer and a player point of view to really define the boundaries and goals of each of these systems so it doesn't like overwhelm the player. So on the left, you kind of see I have an image of a Hermes boon and something from the Mirror of Darkness, which is our meta progression system in Hades. So here we kind of think of these systems as systems that just like make you better. They just like allow you to attack faster, allow you to survive longer. There's always going to be kind of like fill-ups in there to like kind of make things more interesting. But generally, it's like when you see these things, they'll just make you better in a very straightforward way. In the middle, we have a hammer and the chthonic blood, which represents our aspects or weapon aspects. So these items are kind of like, this will change your primary attack and secondary attack in a certain way, but it won't affect like your dash or your ranged abilities, with some exceptions. And on the right, you kind of have a representation of an Aphrodite boon, an Ares boon, and an Aphrodite-Ares duo boon. And here it's kind of like we're going to change the status effects you apply or your ranged cast ability. I think it's really helpful in this case because when a player sees a reward door and sees a hammer, they can kind of mentally prepare themselves to be like, okay, so if I choose this door, what I'm likely going to be offered is a way to enhance my attack or secondary attack, and kind of already begin planning in that direction. Or if they see an Ares boon, they can say, okay, so here I am about to like upgrade, either gain an Ares ability or upgrade something that Ares has already given, such as the Curse of Doom effect or the Blade Rift effect. It's really, really helpful because it prevents the player from having to like hold in their brain the entire possibility space of everything they could possibly do to their build when they get a new item. And this is like really, really important. I think it's really important to force the player to choose. I think early on in Hades, which was in early access for a while, we were naturally constrained by how much content we could make, even though we wanted to give the player all the content our brains could hold. We found that with things like hammers, over the course of an average run, they might get about hammers like twice. And given the fact that they'd see a hammer twice, we wanted to give about 9 options so that on any successive run, any consecutive run with the same weapon, they wouldn't see the same options offered over and over again. And I think 9 options was kind of our magic number because the first time you choose one, it naturally cancel out or block some other options. So after you choose one of these options, you wouldn't have 8 options left, you'd have maybe 6, just like at the most conservative. So this is a number that we got. Here's a quote from Kate Compton. I don't know if anyone has a oatmeal count on their bingo board, but you can increment that by 1. Kate Compton has kind of made this really, really wonderful saying. I can easily generate 10,000 bowls of plain oatmeal with each oat being in a different position and different orientation, and mathematically speaking, they'll all be completely unique. but the user will likely just see a lot of oatmeal. I think this comes back to kind of forcing the player to choose. I think we found that at a point we were given like 3 or even 4 hammers, and the issue was that all of the players' attacks kind of like blended together into this like powerful sludge, right? Like if you're playing with a gun, your weapon fire at the end was always like this quintuple rocket launcher combo. If you're playing the sword, you always had this like massive AOE sword parry attack. We really wanted to like limit this. This is a image I created for our Q&A department. Allison found a bug or players found a bug, and Allison reported it, where players could get 4 hammers in one run, which caused this exact thing that we were trying to avoid. I believe it was you get 2 hammers naturally, but if you deliberately held off on getting a 3rd hammer before the sticks region, you could game the reward table to try to get another 2. So I think combos that worked for us were combos that felt like really intentional, really player driven, and really weren't available every run. I think as you play Hades more, you're able to kind of control for that as you learn the system more with keepsakes and ability to like guarantee the appearance of certain gods at certain points in the game. But what we really liked was that you couldn't, if you want to do one particular combination, you couldn't just chase it down. You were kind of forced to innovate or improvise during a run in a way that I think players really responded to. Here I wanted to just take a short detour into talking about how traits work. So traits and boons traits are kind of like the game engine way that Supergiant refers to god boons and hammers, and basically everything that affected the player in some way was a trait. So we had a system where it was like where we had just a bunch of numbers in, I want to say JSON, yes, a bunch of numbers in JSON that form the basis of every ability. So here, this is like a small snippet from our Ares projectile earlier, the spinning, whirling blade rift. And you can sort of see we have like all these attributes that we turn on, turn off, increase or decrease as we need. Here you'll see like it can go through as many units as it wants. It will repeatedly hit an obstacle. It has a low speed, relatively speaking, but a high range. Like damage radius of 150 units, magical units that Hades uses. No knockback because impact velocity is set to 0. A damage range of 6 to 6. It'll hit multiple times, and at the beginning it'll last for about 4 seconds. So we're able to take this, and we really found it helpful to be able to push the system in a lot of different ways. We could increase numbers, turn booleans on and off, just like change the way any projectile or ability worked by adding or subtracting or multiplying these numbers. This also resulted in like a good amount of bugs too, I think, unsurprisingly when you're dealing with systems that are supposed to be order agnostic but aren't actually. So this is a bug that was reported where Dionysus, which usually creates a lingering fog of poison, if you had a certain combination of abilities with the shield, it instead detonate over and over again in this very visually arresting bug. Because it wasn't ordered correctly after a certain sequence of events. I think in Hades, it was a really fun to work on Hades, because I think with something as rich as the Greek gods and Olympian gods, as well as like the son of Hades fighting his way out of hell, I think we're able to do a lot of things in parallel. I think having for example, Zeus as an idea for a god allows a lot of art to be spun up, has us mentally kind of imagining a lot of things, like when you think about Zeus and when you think about the powers that Zeus grants you, what do you think of? And then in the process of creating those and implementing into the game, usually when we play through the game, you can sort of imagine other systems and other ways that like Zeusy abilities could be expressed. Such as like we had later on in the game, we added an ability called Wrath, which is build up charge over one chamber and be able to expend it to call upon the aid of the god. And we felt like Zeus probably should have like some abilities where that reflects that, because he is like famously in myth a very vengeful god. So that was really we really enjoyed that part, and we really enjoyed the way that like this endless the endless mill of content, water wheel of content, just continued to feed itself. Of course, all good things, I think, eventually had to come to an end. I think towards the end of Hades, towards the end of early access, we had to kind of become a lot more selective about where to expand our game. So Gavin, the programming lead on Hades, kind of has this really apt analogy. He says it's the House of Cards analogy, where at the very beginning of a game, you kind of try to build that base as wide as you can. But as you add things onto it, you're always kind of building up towards the top of the House of Cards. Your entropy is always going to win. So I know that like in a hypothetically platonic perfect sphere of a game engine, we would create an attribute or create a number, like anything that it should always work in a vacuum. But that was so very rarely the case with Hades, especially towards the end when we had all these gods, aspects, weapons, hammers, and constantly just like putting more ideas and more effects into the game. I think we had, for example, like we had an ability where you could clear a debuff, deal bonus damage. And that in and of itself caused a couple of knock-on bugs where we had to change how the debuff system worked, because we had never anticipated having to clear one conditionally ahead of time. But overall, it was really a joy to work on. And I think just like carried a lot of really cool learnings about how power builds up over the course of a game and how to structure it. I think I wanted to first, this is nearing the conclusion of my talk. I wanted to say thanks to Josh Barnett, who created this template for me to use. The very many roguelike celebration organizers, I think it is just like an incredible space, an incredible event that happens annually that I always look forward to. And I want to extend a special thank you to Noah Schwartz, who had sent an email to me saying that he would love for me to give a presentation at the roguelike celebration, without which I probably wouldn't be here today, giving a talk, not physically alive. Anyways, you can reach me at alice@supergiantgames.com or at Alonculus, which is my Twitter handle.
Perfect.
Hello.
Thank you. Hi, I'm back.
Great.
Exciting talk. And I'm really glad that this is one where we have time for questions, because we have, I think, more questions in the note wall than we've gotten yet this conference.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, everyone's got lots of things they want to know. So kicking it off, Chuckleberry asked, I think something you started to touch on at the end is, what, if any, limitations did you set in order to avoid specific boon combinations that might be too OP? Like, were there technical restraints? Were there design kind of razors that helped you avoid kind of overly powerful combinations?
I think some of it was, I think we kind of let our imaginations run wild. I think towards the end, it was maybe partially helped by just like the system was kind of bulging at the seams. There weren't many things that we could add. But I remember there's a point where like Dionysus and Athena had an ability that could just like cancel any projectile that entered the tipsy shot ability. And I think we found out that was extremely overpowered very quickly. We had a lot of help from early access players who are really passionate about diving through the game. And I think it's something that we can't underestimate or understate enough is just like how much the speedrunning and the early access community helped Hades with the development of it, and just like finding design holes or leaks where things just like got way too powerful way too quickly.
For sure. Yeah, and that ties nicely. Kristen, you asked more from like a designer perspective of, did the design space you created between these boons and different sources of upgrades ever become unmanageable? Were there any kind of tricks for managing this increasingly large design space of all the sources of possible boons, all of the different kind of things they would be able to do, like how to keep on effectively working in the space when it got that big?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one part I think was helpful was starting with the silos that we kind of discussed earlier. Kind of like, is this kind of a god boon? Is this more of a hammer boon? Like, we can't have a thing that does like reaches across or breaks free of these silos, because then it just become unmanageable. Like, we can't have a god boon that changes your secondary attack and adds like a special debuff to it. It's best to split that up into something that adds a debuff that can stand on its own, and a special secondary attack that can be slotted into a weapon or an aspect or something. We also had a pretty like strict filtering system. We had a lot of like brainstorming, but after the brainstorm, we had to like really look at an item. And I think when Amir, the design lead of Supergiant, and I sat down to look at these boons, we rated them on both like this will be really cool. Like, it will be really cool to have like a ability that like froze you in a block of ice and made you invulnerable to damage. But like, how would that, like, how effective, how easy would that to be to implement? Like, does that fit in with like the gameplay of Hades? Like, is it okay to self-stun yourself for like 3 seconds? And we ultimately was like, we can't really make this fit in like the fast-paced gameplay flow, so we'll have to discard it. But it's something that's like we shelve and we come back to. I think it's really funny you mentioned that, because I think something that we did in Hades over and over again, we tried to make an active parry system. And I think we tried to make this active parry system work like so many times. It was like, okay, but like, what if this time, instead of having to do it at the right moment, you had like a buff that lasted for a quarter of a second, during which like you could deflect any damage. And it just like, we kept bouncing off of it. I think at some point we're going to figure it out, but just like a lot of like internal play testing and just like and input from the design and programming side of things helped like trim things down.
Yeah, that's funny, and I think it probably is a sign of design maturity as a team to be able to like admit when something's just not clicking, even if you keep coming back to it. I'm curious too. It sounds like there was maybe a process as well where the process of kind of putting together an idea for a new boon or pitching it might be something that someone does as more of like an individual or something like that. But then there's a team-wide process to kind of take that to the design lead and evaluate that. Like, is that accurate that there was a bit too of like, one person doesn't necessarily have to have everything in mind, because there will be a distinction between coming up with the idea and then seeing if it fits into the greater picture?
Absolutely. I think we have these things called like, we had these things called like boon storms, where like like the design team we'd have like this not Excel, Google Sheets spreadsheet, and you just have like, okay, we want like a secondary special modifier, a dash modifier, just like list anything and everything that comes to mind when you would think about Dionysus. And I think there'll be a lot of spaghetti on the wall, so to speak, that covered like every single aspect of Dionysus, from like the from like bacchanals to like satyrs to like to wine. And I think we just like filter that down over time to like what we thought was a really good, strong core identity, while like maintaining these like flourishes. I think for our game, Poseidon in Hades is primarily a knockback-based god. Like, a lot of his abilities interacts with like slamming people against walls or the ocean, that kind of thematically. But I think something that was really funny that arose out of this was also I think internally we call Poseidon like the god of like giving you stuff he found in his couch, because he's the god of the sea. So he's just like, I found some stuff, like, here you go. So an interesting like side branch off of Poseidon, and that one that we felt was like thematically and like narratively fun, was that like he would also just like give you random stuff as part of his like duo boons or his like primary boons.
That's really fun. And the mix of the narrative and the gameplay. I want to sit down on a boon storm. That sounds extremely fun. Another question from Baltzman. How did you arrive at that magic number of 9 or similar kind of values? And how do you suggest avoiding having so many abilities that end up having every run just being chaotic?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, because I think that's a wonderful question. I think the magic number 9 is internally we had a couple of playtests over and over again. I think I have to credit Amir with discovering this magic number, just like to see like how many like what is the minimum number that we can offer to a player that it doesn't feel like the same over and over again. And I think what is really important about not overwhelming the player is that we kind of have these, we do have these like bumpers up in terms of Hades. Like you won't see more than like 2 or 3 hammers per game. You won't see more than 4 gods per game, unless you like game the system with keepsakes or something. And you'll on average get like, I don't know the exact number, but you'll get, I'm just gonna say X. You'll get X number of gods. You'll get at most 2 or 3 hammers. You'll get at most 2 Hermes boons. And in this case, because each of these we kind of conceptualize as like Hermes boons makes your player better, hammers makes your weapon better, gods add like these like additional abilities. We can get a pretty good slice of like how either wide or deep the player can go by the end of the game. So I think this avoids some of the issues in other games where it's like, I mean, and not perfectly. I think you can still get there with like a couple of Zeus builds where like things are just flashing, exploding all over the screen, and you're not really sure what's going on. But it's a little bit less prevalent, hopefully, than just like when I right-click, I fire mortars that fire like homing missiles when they hit a wall, and those homing missiles apply a damage over time effect that causes enemies to explode when they die into like goblins.
Right.
So.
Yeah, fun but chaotic. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I think, and I'll give one last kind of gimme question. I think the fact you mentioned being a DCSS fan was something that the people were excited about. What's your favorite DCSS god?
Oh my gosh. You know, it's I think they're really cool. I think I really liked Shadebro.
Shadebro's like the
Shadebros, or the divination god that forces you to like curse your item slots.
Yeah,
for
like the shattered.
effects.
Is that the shattered one?
I don't think so. I think it had a
Ashen Kawa's in the back. Kawa's the DCSS expert. Thank you, Kawa. Yes, Ashen Zari.
I was very happy when Ashen Zari let you I think curse your hands just so for unarmed, because I think monk I really enjoyed unarmed games, unarmed builds rather. So as a monk, I was happy that I was able to benefit from their abilities as well.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alice. This is a wonderful talk, and yeah, wonderful to have you. I hope that we'll see you at future events, and
Absolutely.
Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you. I'll be trying to stick around for the breakout room at 12:30.
Right. That's right. And you will be in Warrior.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes. All right. And now moving on, I think kind of almost on the topic of combos, I was saying in chat, I feel like a lot of where I get great combo vibes are from deck builders. And so next up we have Brian Cronin. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're here to talk about Monster Train, which very exciting.
Yeah, and I also hope to take part in a Boonstorm someday. I think that's something we'll have to institute at Shiny Shoe.
I like that. All right, take it away, Brian.
All right, welcome to Monster Train Off the Rails, Lessons Learned from Monster Train Development. Just a heads up, I'm an engineer. This talk is more on the engineer side rather than the design side, but as anybody who works in video games knows, they're often very much dependent on each other. So I just want to put that out there. I first want to thank the conference organizers and really the whole roguelike celebration community. I think Monster Train wouldn't have turned out to be the game it was without this conference. We benefited in a lot of indirect ways, I'm sure. And I'm also grateful to contribute. So my name is Brian Cronin. I've been working in games for about 16 years. I was one of the gameplay engineers on Monster Train. I also did the original architecture on the prototype that turned into what we shipped. So I'm to blame for a lot of the mistakes we made. I've also contributed to some of the design of a lot of the cards and artifacts of the few of the clans. And here's just a selection of some of the other games I've worked on over the years. So for anybody who might not know, I'm just going to briefly explain what Monster Train is all about. So it's a card-based deck builder. You start off with a bunch of kind of junky cards, and then you play through battles. You get new cards that are better. You upgrade your cards, get rid of the old cards. It's that sort of dynamic. It has a roguelike run structure. I'm not totally clear on the difference between a rogue light and a roguelike, but I would guess this is more on the rogue light side of the aisle. It's so you go through these battles with your deck, improving it between getting upgrades, new getting more gold, all sorts of things you could do between the battles. And you go through a run. If you lose, then you have to restart the whole run. So it's that sort of structure. It has a very expansive meta progression system, so it's something that players really enjoy about the game. This is the log book, and it tracks what cards you've unlocked, where you are on the Covenant rank, which is kind of an increasing challenge system. There's all sorts of things you can unlock and progress on this. So this is something that players really enjoy about the game. And I'd also say something special about Monster Train. It has a pretty wild power curve. So on the top here, you can see cards from the first deck builder called Dominion. And it's kind of a, you base a card, you get 1 gold. And then an upgraded version of that for 3 money, you get 2 gold with the woodcutter there. In Monster Train, bottom left, Torch is kind of our basic damage card. For 1, what we call Ember, it's kind of like mana or energy. For 1 Ember, you deal 2 damage to a target of your choice. Or for 3 Ember, you could deal 100 piercing damage to all friendly and enemy units. So we really play with the power scale is just a little bit wild in the game, and something that also players really enjoy. And we also have a pretty extensive upgrade system. So throughout the run, players can apply all sorts of upgrades to their units and their spells to just make them better, make them do different things. In this example, they greatly decreased the cost of this unit. They made it smaller. They increased the damage output, all sorts of things that people are able to do through the upgrade system to really customize their run. And while we built Monster Train using Unity, this talk does not focus on Unity in particular. The principles apply to any game engine. But there will be some screenshots of Unity, so just a heads up. And it was released by Shiny Shoe and Good Shepherd Entertainment in May of 2020, with a Switch release in August of this year. So these are the lessons. I'm not going to go through all of them now, but just to give you, if you want some spoilers, there's 4 lessons I'm going to cover here. The first is that the prototype will become the product. So I think we've all heard this in our career. We've told ourselves this many times. It is just a prototype. We're definitely going to throw this out. Don't worry. We're going to hack things. We're just going to make it work and iterate quickly. And everyone knows this is a big lie. It's all lies. And that was also the case with Monster Train. So this is the original version of Monster Train. For people that have played the game, you're going to notice some similarities. There's 3 kind of lanes or rooms of combat that happen at the same time. You have cards, in this case are monsters you play down on the right side of the screen. There's also spells. The big difference here is that this version was real-time. When we first were thinking of Monster Train, we were thinking of it as a real-time game. These graphics were all just temporary, obviously. This is all prototyping. So the energy kind of ticks up at a fixed rate. Enemy spawn, combat happens at a fixed rate. That was how we originally thought about the game. Eventually, we moved off of that, and this is kind of the final version of the game here, which is a turn-based, kind of more traditional card game. But a lot of the code that drives this prototype exists in the final version. So we just kept building on top of what we created. That led to a lot of interesting problems, as my sort of generic Google image search for problems here indicates. So one problem we had, and again, sorry, this is more engineer focused. There are a lot of things in the talk that are not, but I am an engineer. So we took advantage of coroutines. And so for folks who might not be aware, a coroutine basically lets you express code that would happen over time inside of one kind of sequence or one function. So in this example, a unit is taking damage. I shouldn't mention this isn't real Monster Train code. I just kind of put up a simple example. Units taking damage, we're going to play an animation, then we're going to pause for 0.8 seconds. If they die, we're going to resolve a trigger. Maybe they explode, and then we're going to do another animation. So in total, this whole sequence took 2 seconds, and we expressed it all in one place, which is really handy because it's very easy to track what's happening. It's like a Lego instructions: 1, 2, 3, 4. It's all in one place on one page. The logic is very easy to track. You have other ways to express this sort of logic. You might have an event system, and that has its own advantages. But one of the biggest disadvantages of that is logic is all split out all over the place. So you don't have it all kind of expressed in one handy location. So for prototyping, coroutines make a lot of sense, and coroutines have their place in other areas too, but we definitely were a little overzealous with them. So the big disadvantage is there's no separation of concern. All of your UI and input and sound effects and game logic are all bundled together in one place. This led to a few problems. The primary problem it led to was how we did damage previews. So this was really important for our game. The combat rules are pretty simple, but when you start adding a lot of units and a lot of status effects, a lot of artifacts into play, it could be confusing to figure out how it's going to resolve. So we implemented damage previews, which is that little red X there I'm mousing over. And when you, it shows you, the X shows you that unit's going to die. But if I play a spell to kill one of the enemies here, it changes the equation. And now my unit on the left is going to take 15 damage while I'm going to kill one of the units on the right. So this is a very handy thing. This is basically necessary for us to ship the game, something players really enjoy about Monster Train, especially as you start getting more and more complicated cards and units. And to implement this, ideally, you would have a very deterministic simulation. So for folks who might not have heard that word in this context, the idea is, if I have this red domino here at the top and I knock it over, eventually the green domino on the far right is going to fall down. And that's going to happen every single time I push the red domino over. There's a lot of reasons why you might not have a deterministic simulation. You might have random number generation in there. You might be using floating point values that compute differently on different platforms. There's all sorts of other reasons. And this is something to get right. You kind of need to, at the start, you need to intentionally shoot for a deterministic simulation. And we didn't really do that. So as a result, we kind of just ran, our entire game loop was run on kind of a giant coroutine. And we had a lot of exceptions in that coroutine. This code's all over the place here, but if we're doing a sound effect, you don't want to do that in preview mode. You don't want to show a warning message on a screen in preview mode. So we had a lot of exceptions. This took a lot of time to get working correctly. We eventually did, but it was a lot of work. Another problem was just how do we represent cards? And that leads me to then my next lesson is that cards are basically their own programming language. So I love cards. Cards are awesome. I think anybody who has played card games loves card games. You see a binder full of cards and it just gets the wheel spinning. You just get really excited to think about all the synergies, interaction points. Cards are awesome. And I fell in love with cards with this game called Netrunner, which released in 2012. I'm sure there's some fans out in the audience who are getting those feelings looking at these cards. I know I do. But this was going to be my first digital card game, at least my first big digital card game. So, I was going into this with the prototype of how do I architect a card game? How do I represent a card in a way that a designer can manipulate? And I'm speaking mostly of kind of technical representation here, not necessarily the design of the cards themselves. So I didn't know how to do that. And I was looking online. I tried to figure out, how does Hearthstone do it? Or how do other games represent their cards? And there's surprisingly little information out there. So I wanted to kind of show how we do it, talk about what I think is good about this and what we got wrong, and help spread some knowledge of how you might build a card game. So I want to break down a card to show you how it works in our game. So this is Torch, talked about before. It costs 1 energy to play, 1 ember as we call it, and deals 2 damage to a target of your choice. So here we go. Some basic information here, the name of the card, we have description. We had kind of a handy system where we could kind of hook into the effects. So in this case, it deals 2 damage. If we change the number to 3 or 1 later, all the card text will just dynamically update, which is really handy because we shipped the game in a number of different languages. So we don't have to retranslate just by changing numbers, which change all the time. You have some kind of other meta information here, what type of card it is, etc. This is the bulk of what I want to talk about. And this is the card effect, what the card's doing. And there's a lot of information here. And a lot of these parameters are not actually used for this effect. So I'm going to trim it down to what's necessary here. So card effect damage. This is what the card's doing. It's doing damage. We use card effect damage all over the place. This is basically a C# file, card effect damage.cs. It's just a script. Target mode. There's all sorts of target modes in the game. This one is just what character you drop the card on. Should test, I'm not going to worry about that for right now. And param int, well, I'm going to do 2 damage. So the param int was very contextual to the card effect. And then at the bottom, there's some other kind of meta information of what class it's a part of, when it unlocks, etc. So at a very high level, this is sort of how the logic is. We have UI code that represents your hand of cards. When we detect that the player's dropping that on a unit, we try and play the card in our card manager. From there, we remove energy from the player manager. If they don't have the energy, they can't play the card. And then we just, in order, just down the list, resolve the card effects. So there's a lot of code here. We're mostly just going to focus on the highlighted bit. At the top, we're computing the damage, which in this case is just going to be 2. But as you can imagine, we have a lot of different ways to compute damage. There's some sound effect code. And then ultimately, we're going to iterate over the targets. In this example, there's just going to be 1 target, but there are cards that target multiple units. And we're going to apply damage to that target through our combat manager. So this overall architecture worked fine for a long time. We had a lot of cards that just sort of did unrelated linear things, deal damage, draw a card, do this. But it really broke down when effects were dependent on each other and when they were non-linear, so when there was scaling involved. So as an example of that, I'll break down this card, Vent. So this is an X cost card. What that means is it's going to spend all your remaining Ember in the turn, and it's going to scale the effect. So deal 2x damage to enemy units. If you had 3 Ember, deal 6 damage to enemy units. So the way we do this is we have something called card traits. And there's a lot of card traits in the game. Some of them were visible, like do piercing damage, would ignore armor. This card trait was invisible, and it was just responsible for hooking up this X with the effect. So this is saying do 2 times the played cost of this card this turn, which is kind of how it's hooked up. But going into that, card trait scaling add damage, there's a computation to get that bonus damage, that extra damage. I'm not going to go into that, but it just had a way to kind of query those parameters and determine your extra damage. And the way this worked is there was this function in our character class, calculate bonus damage. And if there was a card responsible for doing this damage, we would iterate through its traits, and we would allow those traits to modify the damage. So this is how it worked. And the big problem here, in my opinion, is that the behavior was very implicit in code. So the designer didn't have a lot of control over things. And as a result, we had to kind of custom write a lot of card traits, a lot of card effects even. In some cases for very specific cards. We had some cards where basically me or one of the other engineers was writing custom code to support that card. And that wasn't great. So in my mind, the solution, or I shouldn't say solution, maybe an improvement would be to use the idea of a kind of domain-specific action graph. So this is not for Monster Train, but this is one way it might look. And I wanted to kind of go into depth on a little bit through this example. So this is another Monster Train card called Awoken's Rail Spike. Each of the clans have their own rail spike. It's a train game. It's X cost. It has consume, so it can only be played once per battle. And it draws X cards and applies -1 cost to those cards. So a few different things going on here. I wanted to see how we might represent this in a graph. So the green nodes here represent control flow. So we're going to start at the entry. We're going to draw cards, upgrade them, and consume. So in draw cards, how many cards we're going to draw? Well, it's going to be based off the energy spent. These would be parameters that would be either dynamically determined, such as energy spent, or designer determined, such as upgrade data. So we're going to draw energy spent cards. What cards are we going to upgrade? Well, we're going to upgrade the cards that we drew. And what are we going to upgrade them with? We're going to upgrade them with a piece of data that the designer has hooked up. And then we're going to consume cards. And what cards are we going to consume? We're going to consume the card that was played. But this also could consume any other cards that we have, this card list idea. So what if we wanted to change this so that we draw 1 card for every card in the discard pile? It's a very simple change. So instead of drawing energy spent, we draw the discard pile size. So we might have deck info, which has all sorts of info. We might have the size of the draw pile, number of cards in hand, whatever. And if we wanted to scale, we could also do something like put a 2x multiplier between these 2 nodes. So now we're drawing 2 times the size of your discard pile. So this gives the designer a lot more leverage over how these effects resolve and allows the programmers to write more specific, simple nodes. So lesson 3 is that feedback and iteration are everything. Super important. We took advantage of a system I want to talk about. So in Monster Train, we have the system. It's here at the bottom left in black, beta, press F8 to give feedback. So this was visible throughout the whole beta. This system is actually still in the version of the game that is on Steam. So people could press F8. This little box is not visible, but it still works, and we still collect feedback to this day. So I'll show you how this looked. See if the video works. So you might like this card. It looks like a cool card. You want to give some feedback. You just tell us it's a card looks good. We like this type of feedback too. And you hit submit. And that's it. So from player perspective, it's that simple. So what's great about this is just no friction. They don't have to put in a username password. There's no alt tabbing to a website. It's just all right in the game. Very simple to give feedback. From our point of view, we have a Slack channel where all this feedback goes. And so, the post is some meta information about who sent it, maybe what run they were in, some high level information, and then the comment. And then in a thread, we have the log file, which is awesome. Might have some error messages in there. They might be out of memory. All sorts of things we could determine just by looking at the log file. We also have the save file. So while we didn't have deterministic battles, the game itself was deterministic between battles. Well, the battle itself was deterministic, but we couldn't like go into the middle of the battle, I should say. But the save file would let us go to the start of the battle, which was great to help try and reproduce bugs in a lot of cases. They would kind of tell us what happened, and we'd be able to, through the log and through the save file, reproduce it oftentimes very easily. And we also get a screenshot of what they, so we could see the context to what their feedback is. So this was super awesome, super useful. It's something we're doing on other games we make. It's just a extremely useful system. So if phase 1 is collect valuable player feedback and phase 3 is profit, phase 2 is the most important, which is taking consistent action. So it sounds boring, but someone's got to go in there and read every piece of feedback and take action on it. So we actually had little reactions in Slack, little emoji reactions where we could say, oh, it's already filed in our in Jira, or this is not actually a bug. We had little kind of ways we could tag it to just communicate between us. But we had our producer would go and just go through the feedback every day and file it to someone in a Jira, or we'd at least evaluate all the feedback, every piece of feedback we got. So it's a lot of work, but it made Monster Train the game it is. I think this tool, more than anything, was the reason for our success, and at least any particular tool, I should say. So the lesson is collect and take action on all feedback. It's super good. And final lesson, mixing gameplay logic with presentation is fun until it's not. This is probably the bulk of what I'm interested in as an engineer, and a culmination of a lot of things I've been talking about in this talk. So here's an example of what a card might look like in code. Again, this is not necessarily Monster Train, but this isn't far off. It's sort of a simplified representation. So here we have a list of effects, things like draw a card, do damage. Here's a callback. So UI code might tell us to play the card. On play, we're going to do a sound effect. We're going to iterate over the effects and resolve them through our game effect manager. And then we're going to start an animation to discard the card. And when that animation completes, we'll discard it logically, and then we'll play a sound effect. So let's go dig into this and see what this does. This just has maintains lists of the piles. So the hand pile, the discard pile. We'd probably also want to draw a pile here. And discard is removing it from hand and put it into the discard. So pretty simple. Now, what happens if eventually we want to have some card effects that do something special when the card is discarded? You can imagine a card that does damage when it's discarded. So we're going to go and discard. We're going to go and do a callback on the card to tell it it's been discarded. And we might want to do this because there might be a lot of different ways a card can ultimately get discarded. So we need to put it here just so it gets caught. So here we have a list of discard effects that the designer could hook up. These are special effects when the card is discarded. Many cards won't have anything. This card does something. And we're going to resolve those effects. Now, the thing about this that I'm trying to demonstrate is there's a lot of callbacks, calling back from managers into objects, back into managers. It's a lot of sort of like global access, and in a lot of ways, this is what the Monster Train code base looks like. And this is what a lot of games code bases look like. Pretty much every game I've worked on ultimately kind of devolves into this sort of thing. So I'm just proposing sort of an alternative to this. Because this, when you work on the game long enough, it kind of starts feeling like this. And I love this one. Do not touch any of these wires. I think, toward the end of Monster Train development, I started to feel that way. And, the designer wanted to make some change and, it'd be kind of like a not great moment in some ways. And, it drives you wacky. You just start going wacky trying to figure out how everything's connected. So how do you make spaghetti? Well, in my opinion, it's the folly of mixing gameplay logic with animation, input, and UI. I love this GIF. So it's important to note that a lot of game engines kind of lead us down this road. They take our hand gently down the road as we walk with them. So this is a game object in Unity. Other game engines are responsible for this too. And the idea is like, logically, yeah, the game object is going to have a light on it. It's going to have a model. It's going to have like this movement logic. And you're just going to cram all that into one game object, which feels like the way you want to represent things. It makes a lot of sense, but it also leads to some bad patterns, I feel. So this is what I've been moving towards in some of our other projects, a project I'm doing on the side. This is kind of the structure. So the idea is you silo off. The gameplay logic is completely separate. So in this example, you have world state, which would represent just the data of maybe where units are, what status effects they have, where props are in your world. Any information about the state of the world and how it's changing is in this world state. And this doesn't have a whole lot of logic. This is just some basic logic to query the state. And then the world engine itself is responsible for modifying that state. And it does that through commands. So often player input are going to drive these commands. So a move unit command, play a card command, world command damage, do damage to a unit. So the world engine is going to process these commands and apply changes to the world state. And the output of that is world state changes. So this is going to tell us that a unit moved, that a card played, that a unit died. And it's important to note these are not one-to-one. So damage may or may not result in a unit death. So a world command may not actually result in any world state changes, or it might result in dozens. You might have heard this as model view controller. And under that model, world state would be the model. World engine would be the controller that's manipulating the model. And the view of that are these world state changes. So the way this would work is you would generate world commands from input. The world state changes would then drive your visuals and sound effects. So unit moving might result in footstep sounds through the sound system. A card played might do sound effects. There might be an achievement system, so we know if it's your 50th spell you've played, we can unlock an achievement. And a unit dying does sound effects, achievements. There's probably animation. So these systems can tune into particular world state changes while ignoring others. And it's also affords other opportunities. So it is relatively, well, I should say it's easier, not trivial. It's relatively easier to serialize the state. So you can output this to a save file, to JSON. It's also makes it a lot easier to do networking. You can serialize this over the network. It's isolated from all your visuals, sound effects. So in the Unity example, all of the game objects and all that would just be a view into this world state. So the world state itself would be completely isolated from Unity in that example. You might not even need to use Unity code at all. So a lot of great advantages, and I've been using this for a little over a year, and I'm very happy with how this, with the benefits that this has. So that's all I have for now. I think I talked a little bit too fast. This is my social on the bottom left. So Twitter @BrianG Cronin. And if you want to email me, if you have any questions, comments, nitpicks, whatever, you could reach out in either of those channels, and I'm happy to chat more about it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it didn't talk too fast because it just means we actually have time for a couple questions, which is
Great.
Good because we have a few. People definitely are very into this. And Mark Ritter called the model view controller like one slide early.
Yeah, I knew someone would.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, top question here from Foxtail David. Did you ever have to do any major code refactors due to a card effect not being possible in the current system?
Nothing that I remember, not like a major refactor. I mean, there was a lot of little refactors all the time. But we were sort of on a schedule that at some point didn't allow for big refactors. So we sort of just moved forward and made it work as best as we could. We probably did limit some of the cards we wanted to make because of technical limitations, which is always going to happen. And sometimes you have to make that trade-off.
Yeah. Okay, cool. People have been kind enough to upvote one of my questions enough. I don't feel as bad about asking it. I've found working sometimes with callbacks that they're trickier to debug and follow versus like direct calls. So did you have any techniques for dealing with the debug and kind of readability problems of a bunch of callbacks?
We definitely had those problems. I'm trying to think if we had any interesting techniques specifically with that. We did take advantage of extensive logging. So the company is really big on logging in general. So we have log categories, so you can kind of filter for gameplay stuff versus audio stuff. So a lot of the bugs that I would fix, the logging was really useful. And then it was just the sort of thing when you're working on a code base for around 2 years, you start to get intuition about it and it can track those callbacks a lot faster. But yeah, I'm an advocate for not doing callbacks now at all.
All right. Tacoberry has a good question. What's your favorite entry-level deck building game?
I think Dominion's great. If you're open to board games, Dominion was the first as far as I know. And other than that, I couldn't help but mention Slay the Spire in terms of a digital card game. I think Slay the Spire is really great. It definitely the earlier stages make it easier to jump into. But Yeah, those are the two
I
that come to
feel
mind.
like you're not allowed to say it, but I think that Monster Train is actually a really good entry level
Oh,
deck
okay.
builder. I think it's very understandable, and it ramps you up nicely with the different clans.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, I most of my experience with the game is debugging late game stuff, so I'm used to very complicated board states, and
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty good in terms of early accessibility. Yeah, here's maybe one question from Oliver Uve that I'm interested in. Is there a reason you modify one state instead of a series of states? Which, if it was a series of states, maybe would that plug nicely into your feedback system, or is there a reason why just having one is simpler?
Oh, I see. Kind of toward the end of the talk about the world states.
Yeah.
So I mean, you could do it however you want. The games I've been working on recently, they're kind of, you have a world you're in, and then once that world's complete, like a run, you dispose of it. And so if you were doing a game that was I don't know, like you're going between different buildings, you might have a world state per building, perhaps. You could structure it however you want, but the games I've been doing, it made sense to just have a single world state.
Right. And I guess would it have made sense on something like Monster Train to try and break up, like, here's the state of the monsters versus, what's in the hand versus what the upgrades are, or something like that?
I haven't thought about it, but I mean, it would have been a huge improvement for Monster Train to have that concept of a world state. I mean, there were so many things we could have done with that in hindsight. We always wanted to be able to like verify runs on the server side. So that was something we can never really do. So just to, find cheats and whatnot. That's one example. And then also just to be able to, we wanted to be able to save the battle in the middle of a battle. And that was something we could have done it, but it would have been a lot of work without kind of this mechanism.
Right. Cool. And yeah, maybe one more question from Hyper Gardens. How did you decide on the data format for those game entities? Because it feels like this infinite possibility space there that's hard to navigate. Of how do you actually like turn that into a nice packet, especially with, it sounds like you didn't have to do a whole lot of refactoring of like, oops, we forgot something in that.
I see. So probably talking about how the cards were structured.
Yeah, I think like the card assets. Yeah, that data format.
Yeah, originally, to be honest, it was, we're doing this prototype. And so I'm just going to do kind of something I've done before. Like I had worked on a card game before, but it was much smaller. So I'm going to do that. I liked the idea of the data pointing directly to the script that was going to resolve the game effect. So that seemed nice to me. So I did that. So there wasn't a lot of consideration ahead of time because I wasn't that worried about this rolling into production, but that did happen.
Right. Oh, and actually, I'll just quickly clarify because I see Oliver, you've put it in chat. When talking about the world states, it was actually a question of, instead of having like a single world state that's modified over and over again, and you read, storing like snapshots of the world state as it goes so that you could look at kind of what was the state of the world throughout a whole run.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that sort of thing is totally possible with this method. There's a lot of things you could do in terms of networking where you need to do a rollback or whatever that you could have copies of it. So yeah, this mechanism I think allows for a lot of those things. It would just depend on your use case, what you wanted to do in particular.
Yeah, I think we just found the forbidden possibility of save scumming a deck building game.
Oh no, people do that in Monster Train all the time, and it's like it's there's a mod that like makes it official in a way where you could kind of restart a battle to.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. Really good questions, and awesome to have you. Thank you so much. I think that there was some conversation in chat. This is going to be a talk I think a lot of people come back and reference. Very practically helpful and enjoyable.
Yeah, so. I like practical stuff, and happy to talk. And especially if people have more thoughts on this, this is stuff I'm still learning myself and exploring. So happy to talk to other folks.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much, and we'll see you around. And that is the end of our talk block right now. So as a reminder, if you want to talk more to Alice Lai about multiplicative power in Hades, that is in the Warrior breakout room. And then if you want to go follow Brian and talk about Monster Train, that will be in Rogue. So you can do both of those or wander around the space. We are going to now have another, I believe, hour-long break here. It's kind of like the midday break, so feel free to make sure that you get up, stretch, drink some water, maybe get some sunlight depending on where you are and if there's the sun, and have a fun time. Like I said, check out the space hangar if you want. There's some extra cool stuff there, and make sure to come back in an hour when we are going to have a series of some really great talks. We're going to have more juice. And everyone loves juice. We're going to have the Church of Simulation, and we're going to have Salvador Nelson Jr. Talking about disassociating from reality based on game design choices. So it's going to be get your brain ready for this next talk slot section, because I think that there's going to be some good stuff. Activate the juice arrow indeed. So enjoy the breakout rooms, and we will see you back in an hour. I'm going to stare at you until I get replaced by an overlay. Any second now. Any second now. I can hear Kawa in the other room saying, any second now, I'm going to get an overlay. Kawa. Kawa.